I'm just going to talk about disseminating your engaged scholarship. So I know that all of you are here because you do civic engagement, community engagement. Maybe you're a faculty member or a staff member, or you're a community partner or a student. And so if you're doing this kind of awesome work, I think, for me, I'm always really interested in hearing more about what people are doing and really hearing your stories. And so I am super excited to be here and talk to y'all today. And I hope to hear more from y'all. Let's see. In terms of if you've got great ideas, I'm a journal editor, and I would love to hear from y'all if you've got work that you want to submit to the journal that I am the editor of, which is the Journal of Community Engagement and Scholarship. So just briefly about me, I am in my 25th year as a faculty member in biological and agricultural engineering at Louisiana State University. And for almost my entire career, I have been doing civic engagement and service learning. And so the picture that you see there is me and a bunch of my students when we had just finished building a playground. So I teach a first-year design class in biological engineering, and my students and I partner with local public schools and work with the true experts at play, and that's the children at the schools. And with their wonderful expertise and input, along with others from teachers and parents, we work together to create designs for area playgrounds. And then we collaborate together to raise the funds to actually build those playgrounds. And we actually have two choices at that point. We can either pay professionals to install the playgrounds, or the much more fun option is when we actually pay a certified installer to oversee volunteers like us as we build the playground. So that is a project I have been working in conjunction with our local public school system with for over 20 years. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And so I wanted to share my start in how I got going with publishing Engaged Scholarship, because perhaps at least a theme with me is that I fail a lot. In other words, there's lots of times when I'm not successful the first time, or sometimes the second or the third, etc., that I try something. So I was working with my service learning office in the 90s on developing my first year design class with the playgrounds that I had talked about. And I thought this was such awesome stuff. I was so excited about service learning. And I wasn't aware of anybody in engineering who was doing that kind of work back in 1998 or so. And so I sort of was looking around for people who were doing the work. And my director, the director of the service learning program, said, you really ought to write up your project and present it at a conference in engineering, maybe engineering education, because you can get the word out about service learning and engineering. And I thought, what a great idea. So I wrote an abstract to the American Society for Engineering Education meeting. That's ASEE is the acronym for the society. And I turned in my abstract to ASEE and looked forward to to being invited. I had applied to one of the major design divisions where lots of people go to those presentations. And I thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to explain what I'm doing to some engineers. And what came back was essentially you are allowed to present your work in the poster division. And at least at that point, the poster division was the place where all of the abstracts that had been rejected would go. And so they wanted to make sure that everyone could come and present something, and they wanted all of your registration money. They were hoping that people would come visit you. And so they gave people free wine to come and look at the posters. And I thought, well, my abstract is in there and I'm going. So I made my poster and I went and stood in front of it for the 2-hour time period. And I stood there proudly with people milling around with wine and waiting for someone to come and speak with me, and almost no one did. And then with about 5 minutes left in the 2-hour period, a man came up to me and said, "I'm so glad that you're here. There are 1,600 presentations total at this meeting, and there are 5 on service learning. And my name is Edmund Zhang, and I have just been put in charge of writing the engineering volume for service learning in the disciplines. And I want to know if you would be willing to contribute a chapter about your project for that volume." So that is essentially how I got my start in engagement. And I always sort of try to remember, if I had been like, wow, I got rejected by these divisions who really were not interested in the work, and I just decided to stay home, I never would have made contact with Edmund Zhang, never would have published that first chapter. And that little book really sort of helped to get the ball rolling for service learning and civic engagement in the discipline of engineering. So the Journal of Community Engagement and Scholarship is a general engagement journal, which means that we accept articles from all disciplines that have to do with civic engagement. And it's run out of the University of Alabama, and they started up in 2008. And I have been I was a member of the editorial board of the journal from the start. And then in 2016, they asked me to become the associate editor of the journal when their editor retired and their associate editor moved to editor. So I served as the associate editor of the journal for a couple of years, and then the editor retired. And so they asked me to move into the editor position, where I have been since 2018. And so a little bit later in this talk, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about JASIS. And again, we are always looking for stories and scholarship, and thrilled to take a look at your work. So what I'm going to talk about this afternoon is the definition of engaged scholarship, some approaches to how you might go about, disseminating your engaged scholarship. I have some tips, just sort of in talking to people over the years and participating in a lot of workshops on the scholarship of engagement, just sort of trying to put together some things to think about as you undertake such work. I'm then going to give you a little bit of advice from the editor's chair. What I would suggest for you as you're thinking to a journal with your work, and then wrap up with best practices and conclusions. And again, feel free to unmic and ask a question anytime. So engaged scholarship, again, you can just read, is the collaborative generation, refinement, conservation, and exchange of mutually beneficial and societally relevant knowledge that is communicated to and validated by peers in academia and the community. There are, several different definitions for it, but I like this one because it really talks about the fact that it's scholarship that's co-created. And so essentially, if you and your partners, again, whether you're university affiliated partners or community affiliated partners, if you're all working together to create scholarship, that's essentially engaged scholarship. And disseminating that work or putting it out so that others can learn from it, I think, is a really important component of engaged scholarship overall. So there are lots of different ways that you can approach engaged scholarship. And of course, I think that the best way to do it is to plan from the start of the project what that scholarship is going to be and what it's going to look like, and agree on that up front. But what happens a lot is you start doing some really neat work, and you don't necessarily think about disseminating it until later. And so you're like, I've been doing this really cool work, and I want to share it with people. I think someone might get something from it. And so the key, I think, to remember is that whether you're with bullet 1 or bullet 2, it's really possible to disseminate your work in both cases. And I will admit that for me, I've probably done bullet number 2 more than I would prefer. Or that sometimes ideas come up just from a conversation and you're like, I never thought about that before. Or, I don't think I've ever read a paper on subject X. And that too can lead to some work together. The other thing that I've been able to take advantage of as I've gotten further into my career is sometimes I will just work with a community partner or person at the university just because I really, really want to. So actually, it's just a chance to work with someone that is leading my scholarship. And I know for a lot of people who are faculty on the tenure track, you may not have that luxury. But if you do, that can be also just a really fun way to, help. In my case, I do a lot of work with undergraduate students. So helping them to develop the scholarship skills, just because I love working with them, is something that I've really been able to do as well. So what I'd love y'all to do, I'm going to be quiet for a couple minutes and have y'all think about the work that you are doing or that you are considering doing, and just sort of reflect on some of these questions. The first is, what are you most passionate about with regard to the work that you're doing? And do you have a burning question that you feel like you have to answer? Or do you have an amazing story that you feel has to be shared?